What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. So for today we have a bit of chaotic tech, let's say, hoarding situation on our hands. I have an absolute pile of 10 random Intel processors here on my table. Some of these were built to be a budget champion of the masses, while others used to retail for thousands of dollars straight to massive corporate data centers. We have over 20 years of silicon history right here. We've got ancient single core NetBurst masters from the early 2000s, everyday budget core i3 gaming chips from various areas of the 2010s, and this absolute unit, an enterprise grade server CPU from 2017. But here's the problem, you can't just buy one motherboard to test all of these. They span across multiple generations, completely different architectures, and entirely non-compatible sockets. So if you try to force a chip from 2005 into a motherboard built for 2017, you're gonna end up with a lot of bent motherboard pins and a very sad tech budget. So in today's video we're going to organize this chaos and let's say build 5 logic testing groups, trace the actual timeline of when these were launched, reveal what they originally cost brand new, and see how hard they value crashed on today's market. Let's dive in. First, let's group our most modern consumer desktop chips from the pile. We have the Core i3 7100, Core i3 6100. I'll try to focus on each of them. And the Pentium G4400. So this will be the first pile. Physically looking at the underside of the chips, they all look identical, and this is because they share the LGA 1151 socket. Let's look at the timeline and the original prices here. The oldest of the trio is the Skylake based Pentium G4400. It was launched in September 2015 at an incredibly low introductory price of just $64 American dollars, making it a massive commercial success for office builds throughout 2016. Right next to it is the Core i3 6100, which is also, I think it was launched in late 2015 for 170, I think, is the price that I found. It became an instant legend for budget gaming. And finally we have the Core i3 7100, which belongs to the Kaby Lake upgrade path. It launched in January 2017 at the same 117 price point and was heavily sold up until around 2019. The beauty of the first test is that they are highly interchangeable. If I pick up a standard affordable motherboard using an Intel 100 series or 200 series chipset like an H110 or a B250 or a Z170, I can test all three of these processes on the exact same board without changing a single cable. It makes benchmarking incredibly fast. Now let's jump way back in a time machine in the mid 2000s. The group number 2 consists of these two heavy thick slabs of metal. Our Intel Pentium 4 640, I think, okay, we can spot it, 6040, which is spec SL7Z8, and this other Pentium 4, which is SL8S3. I hope it can focalize. Both of these use the legendary LGA775 socket, a socket that Intel kept alive for what felt like an eternity. If you look closely at the top spreaders, you'll see specs that sound hilariously small today. SL8S3, for instance, runs at a 2.8 GHz, features just 1 megabyte of L2 cache, and moves data across 533 megahertz from sidebus. Looking at the history, these chips weren't cheap back then. The Pentium 4 640 was launched in February 2005 with a whopping price of $273 for wholesale quantities, bringing 64-bit computing at a massive 2 MB cache to high-end desktops. The 2.8 GHz model next to it was commercialized during the exact same 2004-2005 window as an entry variant, launching right around 163 depending on the exact box version. To test these retro legends, we'll need an older desktop motherboard, something running a vintage chipset like the Intel G31, G41 or even P45. Depending on the exact motherboard layout we find, these will either run on early DDR3 or completely classic DDR2 memory. Next up, we have three separate Core i3 processors that perfectly represent the iterative evolution of Intel's mainstream lineup throughout the early 2010s. Sadly, none of these can share a motherboard. First, let's look at the oldest of the i3 family here, which is the Core i3 550. This is a first generation Clarkdale core processor. It was launched in June 2010 at a launch price of $138 and was heavily commercialized through 2011. This thing goes all the way back to LGA 1156 socket, demanding a vintage H55 or a P55 motherboard. Moving down the line, we hit the Core i3 3220. This hails from the third generation Ivy Bridge era. It was launched in September 2012 with an entry price of $117 and became this absolute staple of pre-built office towers for the next few years. It uses LGA 1155 socket. And finally, we have the Core i3 4170. This is a Haswell generation chip. It was launched in early 2015 with a price of $117, representing the absolute refinement of the 4th generation Core lineup before Skylake took over. It requires a LG1150 socket motherboard. Sorting these three out really shows you how often Intel used to change desktop sockets back in the day, while keeping the classic 117 Core i3 price tier alive for almost a decade. Alright, now we need to talk about these two absolute weirdos in our pile that completely break the rules. First, look at this Pentium G5500. It was launched in April 2018 during Coffee Lake generation and was commercialized as a cheap dual-core option throughout 2019 and 2020 at a launch price of $75. This is Intel's infamous LGA 1151 V2 socket trap. Even though it physically has 1151 pads on the bottom and physically fits into a Group 1 motherboard from 2015, the electrical layout is completely different. If you put this into an older age 110 motherboard from 2015, it will sit there completely dead and refuse to boot. And then we have the absolute final boss, the Intel Xeon Gold 5118. Just look at the size of this thing compared to a standard desktop chip. It's an absolute monster. This was launched mid-2017 as a powerhouse 12-core, 24-thread enterprise server processor aimed at massive data centers. The original launch price, a mind-blowing $1,200 wholesale. It uses a massive LGA 3647 socket. We are going to need a server motherboard and server ECC register memory modules just to see if it posts. Now for the fun part, the then versus now price collapse. Silicon depreciation is one of the most brutal forces in tech world. If we look back at the launch prices, buying every single one of these chips brand new back in their respective days would have cost a total of roughly $2,434. The Xeon Gold made up half of that budget by itself at $1,200, and those high-end Pentium 4s from 2005 were premium components of their time, coming at nearly $300 apiece. But are they worth today on the used market? If you open up platforms like eBay, you can find the entire collection of consumers i3 and Pentiums selling for literally $5 or $9 a chip. They're basically given away as e-waste. Even the mighty Xeon Gold 5118, which is used to be the crown jewel of the server rooms, can now be easily bought used around $35 because corporations refresh their servers architectures every few years. We went from almost $2,500 to less than $100 for all of them. And there you have it, 10 processors spanning roughly 20 years of silicon evolution, completely sorted down into 5 distinct motherboard testbeds. We went from 2005 era single-core Pentium 4s to the golden eras of mainstream budget cores i3 from 2010 and 2017, avoided the dangerous 2018 socket trap, and ended up with the massive price of enterprise server hardware from 2017 that suffered a mind-blowing 97% value drop. Now that everything is cleanly categorized, the real work begins. Which generation or specific group do you want to see tested first on this channel? Do you want to see a retro gaming experiment with the Pentium 4, a budget gaming battle with LGA 1151 chips, or a crazy project attempting to run the Xeon Gold? Let me know down in the comment section below. But even if, in order to have the server grade CPU run, it will be a large investment. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want to follow along with the upcoming test bench videos, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.